Lezecher Nishmas, Leili Nishmas, Hagon Achosid, Rabbi Yoel Kahn. I would like to say some voice notes in the next while, next few days, next few weeks maybe, every day, just for a minute or two, something about Rabbi Yoel. But I would only be saying things that I saw myself or I heard from him, and things which have to do with the Rebbe, or even not with the Rebbe, just with Rabbi Yoel to show. And I hope this will be a tielis, because after all, he deserves all this cover that we're giving him, and he deserves, because he did so much for the Rebbe's Torah, that everything is basically based on Rabbi Yoel. He was the main chazer, and everything is based on him. And also he was a mashpia that had a hashpah on hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands probably of Eden. So I think every day to say a word, it's based on what the Rebbe said in the middle of the Shiva after the Friedrich Rebbe. The Rebbe said that the din is doch hashleisha lebech shiva lehesped. So the Rebbe wrote that I had a letter from somebody who writes to me that by Chassidim we don't say a hesped, but we tell about him. So I would like to do that also for the near future, to say over a few things about Rabbi Yoel. Now, and just small things, very short, a minute or 2, 3 maximum, I think, just to bring a point about Rabbi Yoel, who had an impression on so many people, myself included. So I want to mention that the Rebbe said those stories in the Shiva, who wrote them down. So Rabbi Yoel told me that he himself wrote them down, even though he wasn't there. Rabbi Yoel came to 770 from Eretz Yisrael after the Shiva of the Friedrich Rebbe. But he heard the stories from people, and he wrote down those stories. So we see that when he wrote the Hanochas, it wasn't just from later. He wrote the Hanochas from the first day that the Rebbe spoke after the Friedrich Rebbe was nostalgic. And even if he wasn't there, he wrote it down. That's what he told me once. Not only that, in the Hanocha that's there, it says, Rishimas HaSipurim Shezeichrim. This is going to be the list of stories that we remember. Seder HaSipurim Ein Zeichrim. The order of how the stories were told, we don't remember. So if I remember correctly, he told me that these words, that the Seder we don't remember, that was written by the Rebbe. In other words, there was a whole Seder of how the Rebbe told the stories, and the people who repeated it to Rabbi Yoel didn't remember the order. So the Rebbe wrote that Seder HaSipurim Ein Zeichrim. And then he wrote the Sipurim. So here, this is the beginning of the Hanochas that Rabbi Yoel wrote, and then continued throughout many, many years. And even when the Hanochas was written by others, it was all based on the way Rabbi Yoel was the one that instituted it. Rabbi Yoel once told me that the way the style of the Hanochas are written, and Bechal of the Sichas of the Rebbe are written, he's the one that instituted it. If you look and compare the Hanochas of the Rebbe's Farbrengens versus the Hanochas of the Friedrich Rebbe's Farbrengens, the Rebbe Rashab's Farbrengens, they're completely different. By the other Rabbeim, when you have a Hanoch of Farbrengen, it's, as we call it, Kishlishi HaMedaber. They're writing about the Farbrengen. Someone is writing. The Rebbe spoke about this scene, and then he explained this, and then the Rebbe said this. It's written Bekitzer, just Bechlolus, as if telling a story of a Farbrengen. Somebody is telling a story about a certain Farbrengen and brings in points of what the Rebbe said. In the Hanochas and the Sichas B'chal of the Rebbe, it's not like that. It's as if the Rebbe is talking. The Hanochas are written that the Teichen is, the Rebbe is saying these things. And when you read the Hanochas and B'chal Yuri Farbrengen, you read the Sicha, you're following what the Rebbe is saying. In other words, it's the Rebbe himself talking. And that style, Rabbi Yoel said, he decided that that's the best way to do it. And that's why it's written that way. And it's much better, Taka. You get all the details of whatever was remembered, obviously, and the way it was understood by the one that wrote it. But you get all the details, and you follow, and you feel like it's a Farbrengen. But if the other ways is just you're an outsider telling about a Farbrengen. And this is much better, and that's the style, the way it was written all the years, and even when the Mugadik Sichas, the Sichas, it's all written in that same style, and it's all thanks to Rabbi Yoel. Besides Rabbi Yoel having a meidedik head of a genius, and a gewaldige memory, he also had a bracha from the Rebbe to remember. He told me that in Nachman Shel Pesach, I don't know if it was Tovshin Yud or Tovshin Yud Aleph, but in the beginning, the Rebbe poured him a cup of wine, and the Rebbe said to him, "Sols gedenken was meret." In other words, he gave him a bracha that he should remember what the Rebbe is speaking. So he gave him a bracha to remember. So the bracha had on what to be chal, because he has a gewaldige head, and the way he got Chazer Farbrengen is not just because he had a very good memory. That's true. But he didn't have a photographic memory. He had a Meidike memory. The main thing is he had the great tfise. He was teifes of what the Rebbe was saying, and that's how he remembered, because he grasped the Nekuda, the inyan that the Rebbe was saying. But besides that, the Rebbe gave him this bracha, and he said that's als gedenken was meret, when he gave him the l'chaim, and that gave him more chizuk, and that's why he was the chayzer that he was. The Rebbe made mention to Rabbi Yoel the fact that Rabbi Yoel chazes sichas chazerem amorim, and he's the chayzer. I'm sure there are many times, but I just remember 2 times that the Rebbe mentioned it to him, and I heard it from him himself. There are many more times, probably, but these are the ones that he told me. One of them is that it was once Simchas Torah, and the Rebbe was going, to his akofe or from his akofe, carrying the little Sefer Torah. And as it was passing by, there were bochim that were pushing, trying to kiss the Rebbe's Sefer Torah. He was standing there too, but he didn't push or anything, but he was standing there. And as the Rebbe passed by and he saw the people trying to kiss the Sefer Torah, the Rebbe took the Sefer Torah and pushed it towards Rabbi Yoel, that Rabbi Yoel should be the one to kiss it. And he said, the Rebbe said, as if to excuse himself why he's giving it to him, not somebody else. So the Rebbe said, "Nu chazer toch de maimorim." In other words, the Rebbe gave him like acknowledgement and deserves it because he's the one that chazers the maimorim. And the maimorim, this is the lashon he told me. Maybe the Rebbe said the maimorim at the sichas, but the way he told me, chazer toch de maimorim, which means that he's the chazer, and therefore he gets it. The second time that I heard from Rabbi Yoel, another time, I didn't tell me that's the second time, but it's another time that the Rebbe said something that acknowledges or gives him the credit for being the chazer. He told me that's been the famous story when this person who came from Australia stayed by Rabbi Yoel when it was Shavuos, and Rabbi Yoel figured out that it was Shabbos, Erev Shavuos, that really, according to the Rebbe's Shita in Kavat, that day is Shavuos. Then the Rebbe called him in. I'm not chazering the whole story. Everyone knows the story. But there's one prat which not everybody knows. And I said it once, but once I was sitting by Fabrengen, and Rabbi Yoel was there, and I wanted to tell it over because he told it to me, and he Bishum Eifin didn't want me to say it. But now I could say it in public. Maybe I said it in public before, I don't remember. That Bashasi went into the Rebbe, then when the Rebbe called him in, and they was talking about this, him by Shavuos being a day before everybody, which was Hey Sivan. Rabbi Yoel tells me he asked the Rebbe whether he has to say, or he should not say, Zman Matan Tereseinu. Because the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch writes that if those years when they were Mekadosh al Piyariya, if Shavuos came out on Hey Sivan, they would not say Zman Matan Tereseinu because Matan Torah was Vov Sivan. So the Rebbe, he asked the Rebbe about this person, in a case like this, does he have to say it? And the Rebbe did not answer. So he asked again, basically pressuring the Rebbe. And I think a third time, and the Rebbe still didn't answer. He asked a third time, and then the Rebbe answered him. And the Rebbe said, yes. No, that he did answer him, then he said no, that he should not say it. And Rabbi Yoel said it bothered him the whole time, that it seems like he pressured the Rebbe. The Rebbe really didn't want to answer. So it's like a chutzpah, pushing the Rebbe to the wall, so to speak. The Rebbe should have to answer. If he didn't want to answer, don't, leave it alone. But then he felt himself that maybe he was right by doing it. Because after all, he says, he writes the sichas, and he chazes the sichas, and he gives it over. So since he gives over the Rebbe's Torah, it could be negei lapel that when the sichel will be written, he'll have to know the halacha, and they have to know, maybe, so he was matzdik himself, he justified himself for doing it. But he wasn't sure. That's how he felt. A while later, when there was a Fabrengen, I think it was a Yuchvat Fabrengen, next Yuchvat, I don't know exactly. Between the sichas, he was just, something came to his mind, this inyan came to his mind. Doesn't even know why. It just the thought that he reminded himself that he was standing in the Rebbe's room, and he asked the Rebbe, and the Rebbe didn't answer. He pressured, so he was starting to think to himself, was it right or wrong? And then he said, maybe it was okay because after all, I do write the Rebbe's Torah and I give it out, so maybe it was right. As he's thinking that way, someone gives him a clap and says, the Rebbe's calling you. So he jumped up and he comes up to the Rebbe, goes up to the bima to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe gives him l'chaim, and the Rebbe says to him in Yiddish, Sidachfort deile umashke meteiras Rabbi. It's a loshen Rashi on Benegeya Eliezer, the Eved Avrom, that he was deile umashke. It's based on the word damesek, Rashi Tevis. Deile umashke means he draws and gives to drink of the Torah of his Rebbe. That Eliezer used to spread the Torah of Avram Avinu. So the Rebbe read his machshove. He was shasmaisa thinking, is it right of me or not? Maybe because I'm spreading the Rebbe's Torah, I had a right to do it. when the Rebbe read his machshava, he called him up and he said, as if saying yes. And the Lashon he used him to the fort, Deilo Mashke Meteiras Rabbi. After all, you are the one that draws and gives people to drink the Torah of your Rebbe. And B'meila, he had the right to do that. And that was an answer in his machshava. But the Rebbe did say something to the point that he was a chayzer. There is this zettel that's going around with the Rebbe's Ksaviyat Kodesh, where the Rebbe wrote to Rabbi Yoel these words, B'teich Advarim, amongst other things he wrote, that he's chayzer ha'meduber b'yisvadis u'b'teiv, that he reviews what the Rebbe speaks by Fabrengen, and in a good way, kenire mehai reshimas dvarim, as you could see it from the reshimas dvarim, which means the hanochas. So the Rebbe is giving him a compliment that he chazers good and he writes good hanochas. But there's another nekuda which I don't know how many people know, that when the Rebbe Lezer Teitelbaum was a child, and he became bar mitzvah, his father asked Rabbi Ushpol, who was the Maggid Shir where the class we learned, to teach him a pilpul. So Rabbi Ushpol wanted to take a sikha of the Rebbe, the sikha from Pasha Shlach, I think, Tovshin Yud Beis, where the Rebbe talks about Krishma Ktana. If you lay in Krishma before davening in the morning to be Yotze, the mitzvah of Krishma, whether you have to wear a tefillin or not, etc., etc. He wanted to teach that. So he was going into Yechidus at Rav Ushpol. So I heard from Rav Ushpol himself, I think, or maybe from Lezer, who Rav Ushpol told him, that when he asked the Rebbe about it, the Rebbe wasn't so happy, so keen about it, but the Rebbe did say to him that Bichlal schreibt der Chayzer gut. The Chayzer usually writes good. Then he said, but sometimes it's not exactly meduyik. But mainly the Rebbe was like saying maybe he shouldn't do it. But the general word was Bichlal schreibt der Chayzer gut. Generally the Chayzer writes good. When we talk about the Chazorah that Rabbi Yoel did, which was after every Fabrengen, almost every Fabrengen, sometimes there was a tape, so maybe Lav Davke there was an official Chazorah, whatever, but concerning the Chazorah that Rabbi Yoel did, so there were always Rabbi Yoel Chazer, and there was always other people who helped around. Some were Chazerim, some Stam, and it was a small crowd. But there was one time of the year that the Chazorah was very, very betekev, and you could see mit ganze Sturm, you could say, and that was when the Rebbe said Shavuos at night, the first night of Shavuos, 3 o'clock in the morning, the Rebbe would say a Maimer. The Maimer would last, let's say, 45 minutes, an hour, whatever it was. And the whole Eilam was there. It was a special tziyur. It was very quiet because no children were there. There was no noise, and everyone listened. The Rebbe came in, just sat down, put on his tichel, waited a moment or two, no nigunim, and the Rebbe said the Maimer, and then as soon as he finished, he got up and left. And what would happen after that? Rabbi Yoel got up on the spot and started chazering the Maimer. The whole Eilam was still there. You had the whole Eilam of how many thousands of people were there by the Maimer. Most of the people stayed because the Chazorah was right there, and it wasn't so long. And Rabbi Yoel got up with a full kayach and chazer the Maimer. And some people have put in some words, but Bechal, he chazer the Maimer straight. And this was the greatest tzir of Chazorah of the whole year. And the truth is, he listened to the Maimer very strongly. I remember once I was watching him while the Rebbe was saying the Maimer, and he closed his eyes. To me, I thought maybe Chas v'Sholem he fell asleep in the middle of the Maimer because it's the middle of the night. But right after that, he got up and he chazer the Maimer with the ganzen Sturm. And then everyone went home. A few people went to Reb Shia Korf's house, and it was Chazorah again. Then they served blintzes to the few people who came there. Then came back to 770 Chazer, and the people who were there knew the Maimer already, and then the Maimer was Chazer many times. But I want to just bring out the tziyur of Rabbi Yoel's Chazorah by that Maimer was something very special. Rabbi Yoel told me that in the Maimer of Yud Beis Tammuz, I think it was Tovshin Yud Gimel, he had a shaila. He wrote to the Rebbe a question about something that the Rebbe said, which I don't know what it was, but something that doesn't fit to what it says in Chassidus. And it seemed that, I don't know exactly, the Rebbe wrote or gave over to Rabbi Chadek, anyway, that it's really not possible that he said such a thing because it's taka not so. I don't know exactly, that part he didn't tell me clearly. But Pum then, he said, the Rebbe asked, he wanted to hear the tape of the Maimer. The way he told me that the Rebbe did not ask for the tape behemshah to his shaila. The Rebbe at one point wanted to hear a tape of his own Maimer. So they brought in the tape recorder and they played the Maimer, and the Rebbe was standing, I think, Mamish standing maybe with one foot on the chair, and was Mamish standing there very concentrating and listening to the Maimer the way he said. And when he heard what he said, he heard that actually he said the way Rabbi Yoel wrote. And so later on, the Rebbe gave over. I don't know through who, through what, but that's what Rabbi Yoel told me. The Rebbe said that mitzad ribui nevias hamechen is schwer zu magbil sein esius. Because of the flow of the brain is so much, it's very hard to limit the exact words. So Mele, the word that he used was not really the proper word that he should have used. But it's all behemshich to the shaila that Rabbi Yoel asked. But this is the lashon that mitzad ribui nevias hamechen is schwer zu magbil sein esius. Everybody knows about the Farbrengen of Purim Tovshin Chai, Tovshin Yud Ches, 1958. The Rebbe took a lot of mashke. It was a very, very long Farbrengen. And from the middle on, or closer to the end of the Farbrengen, you could even hear in the recording the Rebbe's voice. He's speaking in the tone like somebody who drank mashke. And the Rebbe spoke to private people, said different things to them. And I think the Farbrengen was Thursday night. Shabbos, after Purim, after davening, the Rebbe called in Rabbi Yoel. He sent for Rabbi Yoel, and he called in also, together with him, Rabbi Avraham Shem Tov, I think, who was also involved in Chazorah. And the Rebbe wanted to know what he spoke by Farbrengen. And this is what Rabbi Yoel told me the Rebbe said. The Rebbe said like this: Bis nochen Maimer hab ich gehalten Kopf. Till after the Maimer, I was still following, everything was fine. Actually, the Maimer started with the Loshen Chai Vodem Lipsum B'Puri Yad El Yad. The person is supposed to be happy on Purim till he doesn't know, etc., etc. But the Rebbe said, Bis noch a Maimer hab ich gehalten Kopf. Till after the Maimer, I remembered I held head, so to speak in Yiddish we say. But after the Maimer, I don't remember what I said. So he asked him to tell what he said. What were the inyonim that he said? The inyonim that he was mas, because the Rebbe was speaking inyonim like a regular sikha, but in a different tone, but the same teichen. And they told the Rebbe the nekuda of what the Rebbe was speaking about, what the Rebbe spoke about, and some things it was not even clear to understand what the Rebbe said. And if you look in the Hanocha that the Rebbe was magiya from that Farbrengen, and you see some parts there where it says that it's not so clear where the hemshech is. It looks like the hemshech is so and so, and the Rebbe wrote the way Rabbi Yoel told me. I didn't look it up, so Rabbi Yoel told me it's someplace there. It says that Kenira the hemshech was like this, even though the sikha is mugya, because the Rebbe himself did not remember what he said, but he's just trying to, so to speak, figure out himself what the teichen is of what he said. So they told the Rebbe what he said, and then the Rebbe asked him, "Did they sing the Alter Rebbe's nigun?" And they said yes. And the Rebbe asked him again. I don't know if he asked a third time, but the Rebbe asked a few times. In other words, the Rebbe was really worried. He wanted to make sure that by the Farbrengen of Purim, the Alter Rebbe's nigun was sung. And when he asked them and they said yes, it looked like the Rebbe was not so satisfied, because he thought maybe really they didn't, but just to make the Rebbe feel better, he shouldn't feel bad, they said that. So he asked him again. And then I heard, and this I don't know for sure, but that's what it's known, that the Rebbe also called in Rabbi Groner and asked him also questions about the Farbrengen, and also asked him what the Rebbe said to different people. And he also asked him whether they sang the Alter Rebbe's nigun, because the Rebbe was very much negeya that they had sung the Alter Rebbe's nigun. But Rabbi Yoel, he asked the teichen of the siches and what he spoke about, and the Hagdoma that he said, that bis noch ein Maimer hab ich gehalten Kopf und noch ein Maimer, then I don't remember what I said. The hemshech to the voice note from yesterday, I would like to mention that there's another nekuda that the Rebbe said to Rabbi Yoel then, and he told it to me, and that is that when they were repeating to the Rebbe parts of the Farbrengen from the second half of the Farbrengen, so in the middle the Rebbe stopped him and he said, "Where's the mokir of them? Where is the source for this inyan?" And they said, "That's what the Rebbe said." So the Rebbe said, "If that's what I said, then we'll find the mokir." And Rabbi Yoel explained to me that if the Rebbe said it, then it's definitely true, especially if he said it in such a matzav the way he was then. And the way he explained it to me, really, it says in the Shalah, but he didn't quote me the Shalah, but I'll quote the Shalah, and that's the teichen that he explained to me then. And that is, the Shalah writes like this, that we find by Kedoshim Asher Ba'aretz, holy people in the world, that they drink much more than you should at these big sudas. Their kavanah was L'Shem Shemayim, because by drinking wine they became much happier. So they would say divrei Torah on the table very much, The kiflaim l'tishay, even double. The b'teich simcha megala hachacham rozay HaTorah, because through simcha they reveal the secrets of the Torah. Ki berbeis hasimcha yischazik hakeich hasichli sheyesh benefesh, because the more simcha there is, the keich haseichel of the person that's in the nefesh becomes stronger. But also yeser muchen legalis talumis chochmeh, and then he's more ready to reveal the hidden parts of the chochmeh. Like it says, nichnas yayin yotza sod, when the wine comes in, the secrets come out. So the shalot taiches shal yidei mishne hayayin, when you drink wine, yetzu divrei Torah nikra sod, the divrei Torah that's called sod will come out. And what it means to say that when they drink, it gets deeper into the nefesh, and secrets of the Torah come out that otherwise they wouldn't say. And as it seems from here, that sometimes they don't even realize what they said because it comes from the depth of their nefesh. So this is what Rabbi Yoel was telling me. So when the Rebbe says something in such a matzav, that means that it's even a higher madrege, and definitely it's true. Besides the fact that anything that the Rebbe said is true, and this reminds me of something that happened earlier. In Tovshin Chov Gimel, the Rebbe, in the weeks between Pesach and Shavuos, every Farbrengen that there was, he explained the Mishnah and the Perek of that week. Then later, that year the Likutei Sichos came out. It wasn't called Likutei Sichos, it was called Teichen and Yonim. There was a Likud every week. So in the second cycle of Pirkei Avos that year, one of the Sichos that the Rebbe said 6 weeks earlier was given into the Rebbe to be Megia for the Teichen Yonim, for the Likutei Sichos, which later became Chelik Dalet, in Chelik Dalet. So when they gave the Rebbe the Sicha to be Megia that he said 6 weeks before, so the Rebbe crossed out a few lines of words that he said in that Farbrengen. Okay, crossed it out, so it was out. Then they gave it into the Rebbe a second time to Magia after it was set up ready. The Rebbe put those lines back. And Shabbos by the Farbrengen, the Rebbe explained it. And the Rebbe said that he said these words, but when it came to Magia and he saw these words, he realized that it's not Uzgehalten, that it's not true. And he explained why it's not true. But then he says, he started thinking to himself, since I said it barabim in public, in front of a minyan, in front of Kama Siris Mi Yisrael, it definitely must be true. And I started thinking, and I realized that it's true. And the Rebbe explained why the thought that he had before that it's not true is not so, and really it is true, and he says that's why I put it back. So we see from here that the Rebbe said something, and the way he said it in public, but we know even if it's not in public, it is definitely true, no matter what. So mainly here when the Rebbe said that if I said it, then it is true. But especially in the matzav, the way it was there, the way the Shalom explains that then comes out even the secrets of the Torah, then definitely it's true, and definitely there is a mokeh for it in Torah. After most of the Farbrengens, Rabbi Yoel was to write in shilas to the Rebbe about what the Rebbe said, questions on the Farbrengen. It was really shilas of the Chayzrim, but the main person who worked on it and wrote it was Rabbi Yoel. So once, when he went into Yechidus, he told me right after the Yechidus, this is what the Rebbe said to him. The Rebbe told him that before you write in the Shailas, you should talk it over with somebody else. Because when you talk it over with somebody else, you get clarity. So mainly before you write, you should talk it over. So he told the Rebbe that he does talk it over. The Rebbe asked him with who. So he said, my name. He said, Leibel Shapiro. The Rebbe started smiling. And the Rebbe said, that's not what I mean. He's a Talmud of yours. I mean, you have to talk it over with somebody who everything that you say, he'll try to find the opposite to it. So when someone challenges and tries to find the opposite, then things will come out clearer. So that's one thing that the Rebbe said to him, the shaylas that he asks. And then there was another thing that the Rebbe said to him, that and that'll be in the next voice note. In that same Yechidus, the Rebbe told him another thing, the questions that he writes him to ask. Because sometimes when the Rebbe would answer the shaylas that he asked on the Farbrengen, it wasn't clear how the answer fit and what it was talking about. It wasn't masim. Not always was it clear. So the Rebbe explained it to him. The Rebbe said that you should know that after Shabbos, after the Farbrengen, it's not a pshat, I don't think anymore about the inyanim that I said. I continue thinking about it and looking into it even more. B'meile, when a few days passed after the Farbrengen, the Rebbe said, I'm ahead already. I'm not only what I said with Farbrengen, there's deeper to it that I came to and I'm going further. And therefore, when you write in questions, so sometimes I answer according to the way I am thinking about it now. And b'meila, that's why sometimes you don't understand what I'm writing. And we saw that a lot of times, the next Shabbos, the Rebbe would continue what he said before, and the Rebbe would push it continue. And obviously, this is what the Rebbe thought already on a Monday, let's say, about the further union. But he explained to him, that's why sometimes you don't understand the answer, because ich halt schon weiter, I'm already ahead, and I'm answering according to the way I'm holding. There are some people who wonder why on some Hanochas it says Hanoche Bilti Muge, and on some Hanochas it says Hanochas Hatmimim Bilti Muge. Then there are other expressions, but mainly these two. So I want to explain how it was. When Rabbi Yoel wrote the Hanoche, he wrote Hanoche Bilti Muge. Actually, not only the beginning of the Hanoche, but on every page. The Rebbe wanted that in those years, on every page it should say that it's Hanoche Bilti Muge, so people should know that it's not Muge from the Rebbe. The Rebbe didn't edit it. Because the Rebbe once wrote that Limreis, Kol HaSoras, and even after all the warnings that they write, Kol HaShgiyas Heichel Sacheshbeini, all mistakes come on my cheshbon. So the Rebbe Akaponi wanted to say Hanoche Bilti Muge. So Rabbi Yoel would write, that's how the style was. To me, it looked like this was the trademark of Rabbi Yoel's Hanoche Bilti Muge. Tovshin Chavov, when the Bochrim started writing Hanoches, so there was a whole discussion. So they said, sure, we have to still write Hanoche Bilti Muge. But there's a discussion about it, whether you should do that. And I have to say that it was my idea. I kept on saying that we should not write it. Because for sure, our Hanoches that we wrote are not at all in the same quality as Rabbi Yoel's Hanoche. And we have to show that outright. So we said, Rabbi Yoel's Hanoche says Hanoche Bilti Muge, and now people should know that this is some Bochrim, there's not the official Hanoche, some Bochrim are writing it. So we changed it to Hanoches Atmimim Bilti Muge. And Take, for a long time, we did not know the Rebbe never acknowledged the Hanocha that we wrote. We gave it into the Rebbe every time, and we never knew if he was masking and he was happy about it. Till once, this was, I think, after Parshat Tildes, Yishlach, I think, Tovshin Chov Ches, the Rebbe referred to the Hanocha. He said, I got a Rishima, he called it, which is the Hanocha, and there it said, the Loshen that, in the Sikha, that Yitzchak is given blind, Yitzchak was blind. And the Rebbe said, Shneid Dev, and it cuts the ears to hear such words. How could you say that? How could you say on Loshen, on Yitzchak was blind? You could say he couldn't see so well, couldn't see, whatever. But the word blind. So on one hand, the Rebbe criticized the Hanocha that we wrote, but on the other hand, he spoke about it, means he confirmed that there is such a Hanocha. But it's all still not the same. We know that the best Hanochas that were written by Rabbi Yoel. And even the others who wrote Hanoches, first of all, it was all based on the Chazorah of Rabbi Yoel, that's for sure. And even the way it's written, it's kuntish to Rabbi Yoel, and that's why we felt that we should write Hanoches Atmimim Bilti Muge. Rabbi Yoel, besides being a Chazer par excellence, a special Chazer, he was also a Mashpia, which gave Shurim Chassidus in the deepest way. He was a big maskal in Chassidus, understood Chassidus very well, and he was able to give it over. He had a Keach Hasbara out of this world, and he had Ashpa on hundreds, probably thousands of people. He told me, after he got married, I don't know if it was right away or a year later, a few years later, I don't know, he was in Yechidus, and the Rebbe told him he should become a Mashpia. And the Rebbe also told the Hanhola of Temchet Mimim that they should make him a Mashpia. So they made him a Mashpia in one of the kittas in Bedford Avenue. Bedford was like the Mesifta. Bedford were the younger boys, 13 years old, 14, 15 years old. So they made him a Mashpia, one of the classes, the higher class there. There were three classes there. One was Rabbi Liss, one was Rabbi David Raskin, and one was him. So he was the highest class. So they made him a Mashpia there. When he went to Yechidus later, I don't know if that year, next year, or whatever, but he told me he went to Yechidus and he told the Rebbe what he's doing, that he's Mashpia in Bedford. The Rebbe was not happy. I don't remember exactly. It's even possible that the Rebbe said, Nidos habir gemeint. This is not what I meant. Maybe the Rebbe didn't say it, and the Rebbe just showed that wasn't happy. I don't remember, but definitely the Rebbe showed that he was unhappy, because he says, what I meant was that you should be a mashpia on eltere bochrim, on bochrim, not on young kids, and young bochrim lach of 14, 15 years old. Rebbe Lechatchila wanted to be mashpia on big bochrim who are neither the real mashpia, real ashpoa. And Lepel Mamish Take, a little later, he also became, besides remaining the mashpia in Bedford on one of the kittas, he also became a mashpia in 770. When Rabbi Yoel was working on the Sefer HaErkim, on the first volume, before it was printed. So I asked him, and I told him, I imagined that on the cover, on the front page, on the Sharblat, it's going to say his name. just like it says in the Encyclopedia Talmudis, it says it was made by the Eirach Rosh, who the head editor is, etc., etc. So here it'll say that it was made by him. So I said, I imagine that's what it's going to say. And he told me, no, it's not going to say his name. He's not going to let his name to be written there. So I said, why? So he says, because you think it's my kayach. It's not my kayach. It's the kayach of the Rebbe. I'm just a tool for the Rebbe. And therefore, he said, he's going to make sure that it's going to have the sharblat of the Rebbe. We know that all the Rabbeim, each one of the Rebbes, when you have a sefer of the Rebbe, you have a special design on the front cover. So he said it's going to have the design of the Rebbe's Svarim, because he's doing it it's the Rebbe doing it through him. And his name is going to be mentioned in the Pesach Dover somehow, that you have to write who's involved, but it's not going to say his name. And this was even before they knew exactly how it's going to look in the front. It was not mamish ready to be printed yet. And already he told me that for sure he's not going to allow that it should say his name, because he doesn't give himself any credit at all. And he gave me even an example. He said when a shliach does a pull and he's matzliach b'atzlocha rabo, is the pshat that shliach is matzliach. If he's a real shliach, he knows that this is the Rebbe's keiches. So here also he knows the Rebbe, and therefore it's going to have the Rebbe sharblat. And Lepel Mamish, I don't know how it went, if they asked the Rebbe or the Rebbe said, I don't know, Lepel Mamish, it has the Rebbe sharblat, and his name doesn't say in the sharblat. It says just, it's made through a chaver marechas, through a group of editors, but it doesn't say his name. In the Pesach Dover, someplace there, it says his name. But he wouldn't let it. He said he's not going to do it because it's not really him. It's not his keiches at all. Concerning the Sefer Erkim, so Rabbi Yoel told me that when he was asked to do it, he made a sample. And the sample that he made was from Erech Tzimtzum. That's in Tzaddik. Now he still wasn't left in the middle of Aleph. But anyway, he made a sample and he gave it into the Rebbe. And the reaction of the Rebbe, what the Rebbe wrote was, Be'erech, I don't remember the Lashon, I remember something to the effect that it's good, but happens to be that in this Erech, what he wrote, there was a mistake. And the way I remember, I can't be 100% sure, I remember that the Rebbe didn't write what the mistake was. He just left it. He just told him that you should know there's a mistake there. But after this great work that he does, and to find one thing that's wrong, that's mamish meidadik. But the Rebbe Bechlolis agreed to what he wrote. And later on, as I said before, the Rebbe said that he did better than he expected. The Rebbe established the concept of Kahn in yeshiva. The Rebbe wanted on the whole to choose 7 bochrim that should put themselves more into nigle. 7 bochrim should put in them chassidus, and they should say pulling from time to time, and they should have special schedule, etc., etc. And they're called Kahnim because the Rebbe called the 7 shivas knei hamenera, the 7 Kahnim, 7 branches of the menera. So there's 7 branches of nigle, 7 branches of chassidus. And the Rebbe wanted they should say pilpulim. People, the nigle ones should say pilpul once in every 7 weeks. A different person, different one of the 7 should say pilpul nigle, and then also they should say pilpul chassidus. So those that were said pilpul and nigle said it Motzei Shabbos by Seder, or when there was no Seder, Motzei Shabbos was Friday afternoon, and the ones that said pilpul and chassidus was Friday before Ma'ariv. The Bochum had their own minyan, would say a pilpul in chassidus. And then the Rebbe wanted it should be written down and to be given out, and it was named, I don't know who gave the name, Pilpul HaTalmidim. So the Bochrim who were the Kanim and Nigla wrote the Yonim and Nigla, the Bochrim who were Kanim Chassidus wrote their Pilpulim Chassidus. Now really, the Rebbe said there were 2, like so to speak, editors. So the Eirech of the Nigla was Rabbi Mentlik, and the one of Chassidus was Rabbi Yoel and Rabbi David. And when they wrote the Pilpulim, so they had to be looked over by the Rabbi Mentlik for the Nigla and Rabbi Yoel for the Chassidus. And what Rabbi Yoel did, he took most of the Pilpulim and he added, he rewrote it. He took what they wrote, but he wrote it out the way he's able to write, and he wrote it. And then that was supposed to be printed. So they typed it up, but before they gave it to print, they gave it into the Rebbe. And it just happened to be that the copy that he gave into the Rebbe, there were quite a few places where there were lines missing. I believe in the Chassidus part, I don't know about the Nigel, but Yoel told me in the Chassidus part there were lines missing here, 2 lines missing there, Poshet in that copy. And when the Rebbe looked it over, what the Rebbe did, the Rebbe Poshet filled in those lines. With his Ksav Yad, he filled in those lines. And what Rabbi Yoel told me, interesting, that these are the things that Rabbi Yoel wrote, he's the one that wrote it out, that when the Rebbe filled in the words, it was mamish the same words that were supposed to be written before, that were written there by Rabbi Yoel. I don't know, mamish exactly the same, but this is what Rabbi Yoel told me, that when the Rebbe filled in those lines in Chassidus, the words that the Rebbe put in were the words that Rabbi Yoel wrote before. So it just shows another thing, how Rabbi Yoel understood the Rebbe's inyan and the way the Rebbe's writing and things like that he was a mumche, and it all comes because of his bittul to the Rebbe, so he was able to follow and be mechavan el emes. Rabbi Yoel Kahn was a yid that was uizgit on Gashmis. Gashmis wasn't tefes mokem on him. Gashmis wasn't something that was important to him. He was only involved, his koch was in Chassidus and learning Chassidus, teaching Chassidus, etc., the Fabringens, the Rebbe's Fabringens, the Ramaimorim, etc. Certainly when he was a bocher, Avadi, this was his life, and he wasn't involved in Gashmis. At Knikar, he told me that when he was still a bocher, this is in the beginning of the Yuds, once he was standing in the front in the hall of some 70, and the Rebbe passed by. I don't remember if the Rebbe was coming in from the outside, going to his room, or coming from his room, going to the outside. I don't know. But the Rebbe saw him. And the Rebbe said to him, der Schwer hat gewollt, als Bochrim sollen onton andere Bigdei Shabbos. Which means, and the Rebbe touched to us, didn't mean he should put on different type of godim, like a younger man, the weekday could wear a short jacket, Shabbos, he wears a sertuk. Somebody meant that the Bochrim should wear a sertuk on Shabbos. But he said, the Schwer hat nicht gemeint andere Sort Begodim, aber man soll haben spezielle Begodim on Bigdei Shabbos. Which means, the Rebbe saw, and I even think that somebody even mastered to the Rebbe, that Rabbi Yoel doesn't even change his godim for Shabbos. In other words, he wears the same clothes as he wears in the weekdays. It's not tefes mokim by him. So when the Rebbe saw him, so the Rebbe made a point to him, you should know, the Schwer, the Friedrich Rebbe wanted, as Bochrim sollen beiten the godim of Shabbos, ton unter andere godim of Shabbos, the Kovet Shabbos. And the whole reason why he didn't is because there wasn't tefes mokim for him. So the Rebbe told him that he should do it, and from then on, he made sure to do it. Rabbi Yoel told me a story, which I heard from other people, something similar, also in the name of Rabbi Yoel, but he didn't tell me that. So it could be it's the same story that someone mixed up, or maybe they're two different stories. But I'm just going to say over the story that he told me. This was concerning in the Tovshin Yudar Yudal of Mamish in the beginning of the Nesias. There was a person went into Yechidus, a rabbi, I don't know, a modern rabbi, somebody like, I don't remember exactly, of that sort. And he was there for a while. When he came out of Yechidus, like the Seder was by many times that the Bochrim would surround him, say, can you give over something of what the Rebbe said to you? Any chosh of a person that went in, they would ask, what did you speak about? They'd also ask the person, what impression do you have, etc., etc. So by this guy also, when he went out, some Bochrim surrounded him and he started telling over what the Rebbe says. And Rabbi Chadakov calls Rabbi Yoel and tells Rabbi Yoel, go and listen to him and write it down and give it into the Rebbe. So he went over to listen, and it was a philosophical union, I guess, which to Rebbe was a chidush, but he heard things that the guy gave over. He just came out of Yechidus. This is something what the Rebbe said to him. So Yoel listened and then wrote it down, and I think gave it to Rabbi Chadakov to give it to the Rebbe. The Rebbe gave it out, and on top the Rebbe wrote, and I don't remember the exact wording that Rabbi Yoel told me, but the teichon was, I did not speak about this subject not at all, something like that. I didn't speak about this subject at all. In other words, the guy was poshet faking, and he wanted to give out his Meshuggah philosophies, and he wanted to give it the name of the Rebbe. So I don't know if the Rebbe told Rabbi Chadakov someone should listen to see, because the Rebbe was chesed, he would do that, or the Rebbe knew B'druch HaKodesh, or Rabbi Chadakov Stam said it, and then it turned out to be this. I don't know, that he didn't tell me, but I know that he gave it into the Rebbe wrote on Tag, gave it out and wrote, I didn't speak about this inyan at all with him. And lately, someone else told me that he heard from Rabbi Yoel the exact Loshen that the Rebbe wrote, which I don't think Rabbi Yoel told me that Loshen, and the Rebbe wrote on top, Lahadam. Lahadam is an abbreviation of the words La'ihoyu Dvorim E'elom, which is the same teichem, but that's what he said, that the Rabbi Yoel said that the Loshen was Lahadam. Gershon Per Jacobson, who was the editor of the Allgemeine Journal, would write many times articles, Benegei the Rebbe, Benegei Lubavitch, etc., etc. So he once wrote an article, I think Benegei the Rebbe in the Fabrengen. In the middle of the article, he wrote that after the Fabrengen, Rabbi Yoel mit sein Iluische Kopf Chazer verbringen. That Rabbi Yoel, with his Iluish head, reviewed and repeated the Farbrengen. And the Rebbe, he gave in this article to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe was Magia it, and the Rebbe changed from the word Ilui Shekop, he changed to the word Ge'eni Shekop. Now the difference is, the word Ilui is always used for a young person. A young person has a very good head and he knows a lot, so it's more of a young person. According to his age, he's something special. And the older person, you don't use the word Iluish, you use the word Agoyen. So the Rebbe changed that it's not an Ilui Shekop, it's a Ge'eni Shekop. Now I didn't see this article itself. I don't remember that I saw it, but it was very much known, and came from, I remember, a reliable source. That's why I only try to read things which I know from a reliable source, but I remember this very clear. It came from a reliable source that the Rebbe changed from the word that he had Ilui Shekop to Ge'eni Shekop. Rabbi Yoel told me that it was Erev Pesach, I think Tovshin Yud Beis, maybe Tovshin Yud Aleph, but it's definitely in the beginning of the Nesias Mamish in the beginning, that he was in 770, and it was still a time that the Rebbe would come into the Maskirus office if he needed something to get or to bring. So the Rebbe walked out of his room, came to the Maskirus office, and there was nobody there. The only one that was around was Rabbi Yoel. And together with him was Rabbi Chadakov's son. He was a little boy then, Sholem Yisrael. And the Rebbe said to Rabbi Yoel, asked him if he could type for him a letter. He had need a letter to be typed, and there was nobody else there. So Rabbi Yoel said right away, yes. So the Rebbe told him what to type, and the Rebbe also gave him a sefer and showed him a few lines from the sefer that he's supposed to copy out in the letter. And he showed him which lines to do and in the letter. And the Rebbe told him that he's going to go back into his own room, and in a few minutes later he'll come to the office, Maskirus, and he's going to pick up the letter to take it. So the Rebbe walked out, and Rabbi Yoel started typing the letter, and the Sholem Yisrael was drinking there around there. A few minutes passed, and the Rebbe came to pick up the letter, but Rabbi Yoel wasn't finished yet. But the Rebbe saw that he's almost finished, so the Rebbe stood there waiting for him to finish. But in the meantime, while the Rebbe was waiting, he turns around to Sholem Yisrael, and he says to him, Favos bist du nicht im Cheder heint, or yeshiva, I don't know which lashon he used. And he said, because today's Erev Pesach, there's no yeshiva, no cheder. So the Rebbe took the sefer that he gave Rabbi Yoel to copy from, and he mished to the back of the page, the last page, and he showed Sholem Yisrael the number. He says to him, you see how many pages this sefer has? And then the Rebbe pointed to the shafes in the Maskirus office, and he said, and you see all these for him? And he said to him, when will you become knowledgeable in all these for him? If you're not going to yeshiva, if you're not learning today, then you're missing out in getting to know all these svarim, which means the Rebbe was hinting to him that you always have to learn. And when he said he's not learning today because there's no yeshiva, that's not an answer. But the way he put it to him, he said, "When was the werden klor in dem sefer?" He showed him the end of this sefer. "When was the werden klor in the alle andere svarim?" This is what Rabbi Yoel told me. He listened and he heard this. And by that time, he finished the letter and he gave it to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe went back into his room. The first year that the Rebbe gave a bracha, especially for the Bochrim and Erev Yom Kippur, was Erev Yom Kippur Tovshin Yud Beis. And the way it was, that the Rebbe gave a bracha to others, and then the Rebbe said that they should call in the Bochrim, and he's going to give a bracha special for the Bochrim. But the way it was, they were inside by the Rebbe, the regular bracha that the Rebbe gave for everybody, for Anash. And then, when the Rebbe finished the bracha, he looked at Rabbi Yoel. This is what Rabbi Yoel told me. And he said, Fole, Fole. And he pointed him to come. And no one knew who he was talking to. But Rabbi Yoel realized that he meant him. And he came over to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe told him he should get the Bochrim together. And he's going to give a special bracha for the Bochrim. But the way he called him was Fole. A lot of times it happens by people that you call somebody that you know the father. You call the son by his father's name. So, but the Rebbe, there must be some minion here that the Rebbe wanted to be meramis to him, that in schus of his father. I have no idea. He didn't give me any biyurim. But he says the interesting thing that the Rebbe, when he told him to gather the bochrim and he's going to give the bracha, so the Rebbe called him by his father's name. He said, Fole, Fole, and he pointed him to come. There was a person that Rabbi Yoel used to learn Chassidus with very often. And I heard from somebody who heard from the person himself how that came about. This person's parents knew the Rebbe from Europe yet, from before. So they got their son, who was a bocher, to go into Yechidus. And he learned in the Misnagdish Yeshiva, but he went into Yechidus. And in Yechidus, the Rebbe was speaking to him, the Rebbe said to him that he should learn Chassidus. And then the Rebbe said that since you learn in the Misnagdish Yeshiva, it's kedai that you should learn Chassidus with a Bal Nigla. To say I can learn Chassidus with a Lubavitcher, but learn somebody who's a Bal Nigla, who's into Nigla. And the Rebbe says, for instance, with Rabbi Yoel Kahn. In other words, the Rebbe referred to Rabbi Yoel Kahn as a Bal Nigla. Besides being all the Inyonim Chassidus and being a maskal, everything, the Rebbe referred to him as a Bal Nigla, which means a person who's a big lamdan. And the Pale, he went to Rabbi Yoel and he told Rabbi Yoel the story, and Rabbi Yoel learned with him. And for many years, Rabbi Yoel learned with him. But the interesting part is that the Rebbe referred to Rabbi Yoel as a Bal Nigla. As a Bocher yet, I once heard from somebody that someone told him that person heard a word on Yechidus from the Rebbe, a remes to the minig that the Baal Shem Tov instituted, that you should say the Tilim, capital Tilim, according to your age. It means if you're 13, you say capital Yudalet, if you're 14, you say capital Tesvav, etc., etc. And the remes the Rebbe told him is that capital Ayin Beis finishes off with the words Kolut Tfilis David ben Yishai, which means the Tfilis of David are finished, which seems a pashta, that means that that's when David passed away. So it seems that when David passed away, he was saying that capital, and that's capital Ayin Beis. But the Gemara says in Brochas that really capital Aleph and capital Beis are really one capital. So capital Ayin Beis is really capital Ayin Aleph. So here we see that when David HaMelech passed away when he was 70, he said capital Ayin Aleph. So it's a remes to this. I told Rabbi Yoel, he was working on the Likutei Sichos then, and I was a little bit involved with it, but not much. But I used to, talk to him about it and work a little bit. And I told him this word, and I said it's a word from the Rebbe that we don't find in any sikha, it's not in any letter, it's an interesting word, and the word will be forgotten. So when it comes to, if you ever comes across an opportunity, writing a sikha which brings out this nekude of saying the capital Tilma according to your age, so I think it's a good idea. You make it as a ha'ara, because it's the Rebbe's word. So Rabbi Yoel tells me, I'm not going to do it. I said, why not? So he said, because I know what's going to happen. I know the way it works by the Rebbe. The Rebbe is going to ask, but how does it fit to the meaning that it is that capital Aleph and Beis are two separate capital? So it doesn't fit. And why don't we say it that way? The Rebbe is going to ask a shayla, and I can't write something that I have no full understanding of it. And the Rebbe is going to make a question about it and say to me, why did you write it? It's not really so and so, etc. He didn't want to do it. Fine, so he didn't do it. Later on, when we the Bochum started writing Likutei Sichos, that's in Tovshin Lamed Gimel Lamed Dalet. So there was an opportunity in the Sikha that came out for Tildes Tovshin Lamed Dalet, which is a Sikha from Pashas Chaisor Tovshin Lamed, but the Sikha, and there it mentions this inyan of saying the capital according to your age. So since it was in my hands, so I made a ha'ara, wrote a ha'ara, that this is when it mentions in the Sikha that this meaning, that there's a remes to this, and I wrote this remes. And what taka happened to Peil? Rabbi wasn't magi at it. Actually, the ha'ara that I wrote l'chila was a small one, just that word as a remes, because that's what we heard the Rebbe said. The Rebbe added to it, made the ha'ara much bigger, twice or three times the size, added different things into the ha'ara, and the ha'ara came out in the Sikha for Shabbos, Pashatil, the Tovshin Lamed Dalet, the Sikha came out with, and this ha'ara was there. Shabbos by Fabrengen, the Rebbe spoke about it. And the Rebbe said, how could we say such a thing? And even though it says in the Ha'ara that this is only written l'chidude, v'raya l'chidude, that chidude means for sharpness, it's not a real raya, but still it has to be usgehalten, and it's not usgehalten, because by us it's not one capital, it's two capital at that time it was, and the Rebbe went to the Holarichas, and the Rebbe was masbirit, but the Rebbe, so to speak, started off by saying it, how could it be written that way, when it's really not, and he explained it. And after Shabbos, the Rebbe said that that whole beer should be written up and it should be made as a hisofe to the Sikha. So next week, the likud that came out in the back, there was a long hisofe to the Sikha of the week before, to this inyan, to this ha'ara. And when they printed, look at the Sikha's Chelik Yud, the Sikha is printed with the ha'ara. And after Tildes Aleph in the Sikha's Chelik Yud, there's a big hisofe there, which is of that Sikha. But what I saw then, that Rabbi Yoel had the proper understanding in the Rebbe's Sugang. He knew how things are. The Peil Baruch Hashem worked out, the Ha'ara is there, and the Rebbe spoke about it, but that's what he was afraid of actually happened. See, I think it's a Ha'ara, you write it, it's the Rebbe's Avort, and that's it. But he had a deeper understanding. He understood that something like this, but the Rebbe nicht durchlosen. He's not going to let it go through just like this. And that's why he was afraid that he'll get caught up in this and he won't know what to answer, won't know what to do. The Peil, it worked out. But I saw then, when after this, the Rebbe said this, and spoke about this Fabrengen, I saw that Rabbi Yoel had a verstand. And he had the chush of Chapin Guf, how the Rebbe would react to things like this. And as we see, the attack happened.